Okay, well, kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you so much for coming along today. It's great to have you here on this rainy Thursday. I hope you've got a hot drink and something to eat. I'm making the assumption that you're all used to this online format and that if you've got any questions as we go along, please pop them into your chat box and we'll answer those at the end. If you'd like to introduce yourself via the chat box as well, it would be lovely to know where you are joining us from today. I'm not able to actually see right now because I've got my presentation up, so I'm not sure who's actually here yet. So it's 11:59, so I will not start the actual presentation for another minute, but yeah, so if you're there, it'd be great to know. And yeah, we are recording this presentation. Oh yay, here's Waikato new cat, great, thank you. I'm in Te Pahu, so not too far away. Yeah, I'll start at 12 o'clock oh yes, that's right, I said I was recording this so that if you want to watch it later you can, and also if you miss it for some whatever reason then you can watch us as well. So I'll give a few more minutes for people, a little bit of time for people to arrive, because I know that not everyone can get in right on at 12 o'clock, so I understand that. And so yeah, hopefully you guys can all see my screen, which I'm sharing there. That's Lake Cameron. I thought I'd put a photo of that up there. And so here we go. And so it's right on 12 o'clock. And so I'm Nadine Berry and I work in the Waikato region. I have a small lifestyle block of only about 2 acres with 4 sheep and 19 silky bantams. I see one of them's just escaped as well. Need to get back into the enclosure. And we've got lots of trees. I would like to acknowledge my colleagues, especially Annette Litherland, for developing the initial resources for lifestylers, and Rihanna, Wendy and John, who condensed the material for this webinar. The New Zealand LANCA Trust has recently celebrated its 25th birthday, and we have been supporting rural communities in sustainable land and water management since 1996. And our main focus has been working with care groups and catchment groups. However, as I mentioned, my colleagues have developed some awesome resources to support small block owners and lifestylers, or should I say life sentence block owners. And, oh, I wonder why that's not. Oh, there we go. Okay, so the great news for us lifestylers, even if it is a life sentence, is that we are not required by law to undertake a farm environment plan. Although farmers and owners of larger blocks of land are, and they are also facing challenges with the uncertainty around new regulations regarding freshwater, climate and biodiversity. We believe an FEP is a useful tool to assist you in enhancing biodiversity and freshwater values on your property. Also, many farmers in New Zealand are starting to form catchment groups, and with smallholders undertaking environmental plans and working towards similar goals, we believe this helps farming communities thrive together. This is the outline for today. The intent is that you are prepared to critically assess your property and can start filling out your FEP template by the end of this webinar, and you know where to go for further information as required. You should have received an FEP template. I emailed that to you yesterday or today, as the case may be, and we'll be moving through the template today, but you don't need to fill it out now. Feel free to refer to the sections as we move through them though. This slide is just to outline that other primary industries are supportive of FEPs for farmers with larger blocks of land. The objective of an FEP is to minimise and manage the impact our land use has on the ecosystem, inclusive of soil, fresh water and biodiversity. Regardless of how we use our land, we have an impact. And the ideal will be that completing the FEP process helps us consider what we can tweak for better overall outcomes. A farm environment plan is a tool that can help us recognise environmental risks and set out a program of actions to manage those risks to ensure your property has healthy soil, fresh water and biodiversity into the future. Now that we have a better understanding of the purpose behind an FEP, it's time to get on with creating one. Remember, your FEP is a living document. If you have the template I sent you nearby, as I said, there's no need to fill it in now, but you can follow along as we go through it if you like. Our core focus as we do so today is, firstly, Acknowledge what you already know and do well. And secondly, assess what practices could be improved on and how. As an FEP is about your property, you need to provide some details and context. So include personal information and description of your property use and assets, perhaps a bit of relevant history. Add some photos if you'd like. Photos are good for documenting progress and seeing changes over time. A map is an essential part of your plan. Mapping can be as complex or as simple as you choose to make it. You can hand draw features over an aerial photo, or you may already know how to use the different GIS tools available. The New Zealand LANCA Trust has a series of webinars about using Google My Maps to create a map, which you can find on our website, or you can ask a younger member of your family or a friend to help you. Last resort would be to pay someone to help you. Useful things to map are native vegetation, areas with restoration potential, waterways and wet areas, stock crossings and races, areas prone to erosional pugging, different farm management units, standoff pads, cultivated areas, holding pens, septic fields, flood zones, and so on. Marking out critical source areas on your map will be important if you don't already know these areas, as they are opportunities for improvement for your systems and the environment. Next up are goals. What are your environmental goals for your property? Goals can be added now if you already have some in mind, or after you go through the land use and environmental risk assessments. Goals will help you focus your action plan. You may like to have at least one goal for each risk or good management practice, be it soil health, biodiversity, waste management, or so on. For example, if you could state that you want to see an increase in tuna or eels in your stream, or reduce bank erosion, or reduce pugging over winter. Remember, goals are outcome-based, they are not actions. Goals are broader and may encompass many actions to meet the goal. For example, increasing tuna is the result you want, but it's likely it will take you many actions to achieve this. Goals keep you focused, so if you start to wonder why you're doing something, you can refer back to them. You could also talk with your neighbours, as they may have similar goals. There might be something you can work on together, such as a riparian planting to create a wildlife corridor. For the next step, we're looking at your current land management practices. It's important to note what you are already doing. This way, gaps and risks will be naturally highlighted, and this helps you form your actions. The problem with going straight to actions is it's likely you'll miss some risks. The next series of slides will run through typical land management practices. But before we do that, we would like to highlight critical source areas. Critical source areas are anywhere on your land that is at risk of losing contaminants. So areas that are prone to surface runoff, carry nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen, or E. coli and sediment into waterways. These areas typically feed into a drain or stream and can be gullies, swales, former wetlands, or natural springs. The identification and subsequent mitigation of critical source areas is integral to developing a thorough FEP. Taking a look at these two images, where do you think the critical source areas are? Feel free to use the chat box to reply, and I'll give you a bit of time to do that. If you'd like to pop in the chat box where you think the critical source areas are on these two photos here. Okay, no one's prepared. Oh, yes, the stream banks, excellent. Yep, that's right. And in the image on the right, it looks like a stock crossing and a waterway without a culvert. Yep, exactly that crossing there. And on the image on the left, we're looking at an unfenced area of graze paddock where it looks like stock have direct access to water. So, yeah. Runoff from critical source areas impacts ecosystem health in numerous ways, and different regions struggle with different challenges based on geology, climate, and predominant land use. Impacts on the ecosystem include sedimentation, which decreases water clarity, increases water temperature, blocks photosynthesis, and damages gills of fish and invertebrates. Nitrogen and phosphorus in excess can lead to nuisance growth of plants and algae, and in extreme concentrations is toxic to aquatic animals and human health. E. coli in waterways is an indicator of fecal matter, be it human or animal, getting getting to the waterway, and it's an indicator of the presence of other harmful bacteria. For your property bottom line, the loss of soil and nutrients into waterways is like having holes in a bucket. Nutrients in topsoil are valuable, and their loss is unsustainable for productivity and finances, not to mention waterway health. Do you know where all these areas are on your property? You may already know them as that part of the paddock that takes ages to dry out, or that raceway that scours after a heavy rain. If you can't remember them off the top of your head, maybe after this session, seeing as we've had a little bit of rain, grab your gumboots and walk your property and draw your critical source areas on your map. Where does the water flow? Excuse me. Does it risk carrying fecal contaminants with it? Where does water overflow? Does it risk carrying contaminants with it? And where does water pool? Slow draining areas risk soil exposure with overuse. Where are your areas of sediment loss? Bare earth plus rain plus pathway to water equals soil loss and sedimentation. You can draw these critical source areas on your map. To manage critical source areas, landowners undertake good management practices to help mitigate various land management issues or land use practices. As you go through the process of creating your action plan within your FEP, it's good to refer to these GMPS, so good management practices, that you are using, so you are using your time and money efficiently and effectively. We're now going to run through some GMPs. There is a lot of information to take in, so we've just provided a brief snapshot of each of the main ones. For more information on this, you can refer to your Appendix 1 of your template, as we've linked some really great resources there. All of you with stock will already be thinking about stock management for production and animal welfare. This good management practice is also about applying an environmental lens to the impact from stock. Ensure you have appropriate stocking rates for your property. Too many stock result in more pollutants entering waterways, compacted soil or soil pugging. Fewer well-fed stock can give better returns than underfed stock. If you can, exclude stock from at least 3 meters from streams, waterways, including drains and wetlands. Adapt your grazing regime for the conditions. For example, graze wetter paddocks earlier in the winter to avoid pugging, and drier paddocks earlier in summer to avoid overgrazing. And remember to take water to the stock, not stock to the water. Getting stock through the winter is one of the biggest challenges lifestylers can face. The key to plan is to plan your winter grazing before winter and use your knowledge of how your paddocks cope with winter to avoid greatest impact. There are some key strategies you can use, such as which direction you strip graze, temporary or permanent fencing of wet areas, back fencing to reduce pugging, and planting catch crops in late winter to take up excess nitrogen. Beef and lamb have provided a great webinar on this, so you can use your, refer to your template for that link. Like winter cropping, cultivation to reduce environmental impacts requires a bit of strategy. Paddock selection involves avoiding cropping on steeper paddocks and cultivating along contours rather than up and down the slope. Sediment runoff or wind erosion is a problem during cultivation or when vegetation cover is too short and sparse, so try to reduce bare earth as much as possible. Healthy soil will reduce sedimentation, so build up organic matter and maintain good soil structure, and permeability will reduce runoff. And remember to build in your buffers around waterways. Oh no, we lost audio. That's no good. The only thing I can think there, Marlon, is to maybe come back out, go out and come back in again, and that might help if you have lost audio. In New Zealand, we lose an average of 200 million tonnes of soil per year, which is 10 times higher than other countries. When you lose your topsoil, that's your most valuable asset. Erosion takes away the most productive land you have, leaving behind the least fertile soil. And soil can take up to 50 years to recover from erosion. So the goal is to retain sediment on the land before it gets into the waterways. For hills, good management practices for erosion prevention means maintaining good cover of pasture and avoiding overgrazing. Minimize tracks and go across the slope, keeping tracks as flat as possible. Consider allowing native regeneration or plant trees on erosion-prone land, particularly gullies. Some sediment loss may be inevitable, so add cutoffs, culverts, and sediment traps to catch what you can't avoid. Get advice from Waikato Regional Council if you're unsure about this. Stock damage to stream banks and vegetation along the stream margin will increase the risk of erosion. Set permanent fencing back far enough to prevent bank erosion and to allow for changing stream meanders. Options for preventing or reducing stream bank erosion include planting, which is soft engineering, and hard engineering, which includes structures such as rock walls or actions such as bank reshaping. Do not undertake hard engineering without checking with the Waikato Regional Council, because you will most likely need a consent. Hard engineering is almost a last resort too, because you may alter stream flow and create unintended consequences downstream. Plantings will need to be maintained, as weeds can overtake your plantings, and if you use sterile willows, these will need to be managed and eventually removed. First, double check where your streams run when they are in full flow. This will help you decide where to place fences and what to plant. It would be a waste of time and money to place fences where they are likely to wash out, or plant the wrong type of plant in a dry patch or in a flood zone. Second, identify wet areas on your farm. This includes seeps, boggy areas, springs, gullies, and eroding banks. In New Zealand, we've lost 90% of our wetlands, so protecting any wetlands you have is important. If you graze, you need to prioritise fencing. Set your fences back at least 3 metres, but ideally 5 metres on flat land and 10 metres on slopes. This is a sufficient width to adequately filter sediment and any runoff from reaching water. With fencing, you may still need access across a stream via culverts or bridges. The goal is to reduce the input of contaminants directly into the water, as well as minimise stream bed disturbance. Talk to the Waikato Regional Council, as you're likely to need a consent if you're installing a bridge or culvert. Next, plan for planting. You can start by leaving rank grass, which still filters pollutants, but without grazing, weeds may take off, so you will need to factor in some weed control. Ideally, plan for planting in native species. They provide better habitat for aquatic and terrestrial animals, and as natives grow, they shade out most weed species, but will need maintenance for the first 5 years or so. You may be lucky enough to have bush blocks or wetlands on your property, or you want to create these assets to enjoy. These are precious resources for native insects, birds, and plants, and are a fantastic amenity area to enjoy. Your first step is to fence these off if you have stock. Stock will graze on seedlings, impeding natural regeneration, and they often select certain species too, which can result in an imbalance. Stock also impacts soils and hydrology by pugging and compaction. It's sometimes a place for lightly grazing sheep for weed or fire control, but consider phasing this out and increase your native plantings. Control weeds. Remember to spend time on the ones that have the most impact. You may be able to get advice from Waikato Regional Council, and there's a great app called Seek, which helps you identify the species from a photo. There's also the Weed Busters website, which is in your appendix as well. Control pests. Rabbits and hares can impact on your native plantings, as can possums. Rats, both ship and Norway, eat chicks, eggs, and seeds, while mustelids, which are ferrets, stoats, and weasels, are our main predators of native birds. Hedgehogs also prey on invertebrates, such as weta and our native lizards, and eggs of ground nesting birds in wetlands. Even small blocks can add biodiversity, such as a mixed species hedge, to provide food and stopover places for birds and wildlife corridors. Just remember, wetlands and wetted areas on private land are subject to council rules. Always seek advice before altering a wetland. No, that's true. So somebody's just posted that it's works and structures and waterways are linked to their scale, size, with consents permitted activities. It's not a default consent requirement situation. There's options, especially around fitting the project structure to fit within the permitted activity rules. Cool, thanks Peter, that's awesome. Fertilizer should not be applied within 5 meters of any waterway or in gullies. The buffer, even if only rank grass, acts as a filter, slowing down runoff and catching sediment and phosphate. Our best advice is to read and follow the label. Sounds simple, and it's also worth getting your soil tested so you don't end up applying unnecessary fertilizer, as what the plants don't need will leach into the water table or waterway. Infrastructure can be one of the biggest sources of pollutants and sediment. Ensure your tracks have good camber and drainage. Install bridges and culverts on tracks that go through waterways. Ensure these are draining away from the waterway. A failing wastewater system can lead to the release of pathogens and nutrients to streams, groundwater, and potentially swimming locations. Make sure your septic systems and soakage fields are well maintained and fit for purpose. That's the end of the section on GMPs. There are a few others, such as fire and waste, but we feel these are a bit more self-explanatory. So in the essence of time today, we won't cover those, but they're in your template. Now, once you've assessed your current practices and identified your critical source areas, it may seem a bit daunting and possibly like you've got a lot to tackle. To start, take a deep breath, focus on your priorities, and you can assess the environmental risk and impact. You've likely seen this kind of table before for health and safety systems, and it's just the same for completing an environmental risk analysis for your various practices and your critical source areas when you've identified these. So start by asking, what is the likelihood of an impact occurring? Is it unlikely or very likely? Then consider the scale of the impact, negligible or significant. At the intersection of that, of the likelihood and impact is the environmental risk of that land management use or practice or critical source area. And this can help you prioritize your actions so it feels less daunting. Great, you've acknowledged what you know and you do already, and perhaps you've discovered what could be improved upon. And you've analysed the level of environmental risk. This should now lead you to identifying actions that need to be done. Your action plan is now the nuts and bolts of your FEP. Try and have actions that are achievable in a certain time frame. Some may be broken down further into manageable bites with a more in-depth plan, example for a large-scale planting project. Try and prioritise the actions so that you don't feel overwhelmed. Ideally, critical source areas and practices with a high environmental risk should be a higher priority, but actions chosen and their priority is ultimately a personal choice. It's up to you, based on available time, finances, or something else that means more important. It's something else that's got a higher priority for you. And note here that the cost and timeframes are both estimates to help with the prioritization process rather than set in stone. And there you have it, your own FEP for your property. Hopefully, you all feel better equipped to undertake an FEP with the template you have and the resources that we have provided. Are there any questions? And I will stop sharing my, are there any questions? I'll give you some time, with respect to, sorry, thanks, Peter, for that clarification. I'm going to, so that's the end of our presentation. And then I just thought that I would highlight on the New Zealand LANCA Trust website, we've got this awesome, so this is our website here. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, Annette developed these resources, and all of them, a huge number of them are here. And so they're all based at the top of the south in the Motiri catchment, but some of these things are all just so applicable across the region, across the country, that there'll be some helpful resources here. So that's, and then also, and it's done a couple of longer YouTube videos as well, specifically for that catchment. But yeah, that's where a lot of our resources are. And I thought I would just share that with you. We've also got this really cool map here of community groups and environmental community groups, because sometimes it's helpful to connect with others that you next door or people you know about. And so going to our map and seeing where all the different groups are, here's in the Waikato here. Let's zoom back out a bit. And you can see if maybe I could filter. I can filter, can't I? Region, filter Waikato. Apply. And then you can see all the different groups in the Waikato, and those are the catchment groups, and then the little dots are the LANCA groups or care groups that are working. Alrighty, yes, a question. If we must reluctantly spray weeds in a paddock, how far from the waterway do we need to avoid spraying? I would imagine the 5 metre setback would be a sensible setback. Peter, do you want to answer that question? You might know more than me. is there a link to the online LANCA resources in our documents? Yes, there is. So in your documents, you have all of the links. I've made sure that, and they're all Waikato related. So I've got some awesome resources from the Waikato Regional Council, different other organisations. I've put Beef and Lamb in there, and Dairy NZ and Weed Busters. So all of the resources that I've spoken about or mentioned, or all the GMPs, all have extra resources there for you to link to. Yep, cool. And as I said at the beginning, in terms of the rules, check the respective district council and regional council plans. In terms of best practice, follow the spray levels. Yeah, that's what I said. Ha, excellent. Follow the spray levels. Thanks, Peter. That's awesome. Cool. Yay. I can probably stop sharing my screen now and see if there's anything else, any other questions that people have out there. And if not, we can head off and go. You guys could head out and go and look at your properties and do some assessing. How does that sound? Any other questions? I'd like to thank you all for coming along today, because you know it's a lot going on. 40 acres, would that be covered effectively by the lifestyle? Oh, 40 acres, how much is that? Because you have to be under 20 hectares in order to, okay, so if you're under 20 hectares, you're fine, and you can just use this lifestyle plan and you'll be fine for that. Cool. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much for coming along. It's really great. Yeah. So, we did well. I might have gone a little bit fast there, but hopefully you got all the information in there. And well, yeah. Oh, thanks, Peter. That's so kind. Yeah. Hopefully, as I said, we're recording this, so if you do feel you want to watch it again and just take in some of that information, you can. But you've got your template, you've got your good management practice poster, all the resources and all the links are in there. So yeah, go out and go hard. That'll be great fun, I reckon. Probably you've done a lot of this already, so it's just adding to what you've already got on your knowledge. So yeah. Is there anybody in the WRC specialising in this? Now that's a great question, and I know that there are a couple of staff at the Waikato Regional Council who are called Sustainable Ag Advisors, and I'm wondering if they might be the best people to start. But then there's also the catchment management officers who are at the Regional Council as well. So I think the best thing to do would be to ring the Regional Council. They've got an 0800 number, which is 0800 800 401, and ask to speak to somebody from your region about a farm environment plan for a lifestyle block. It's interesting actually, because this seems to be slipping through the cracks for regional and central government and even local government to a certain extent, because it's not required by law. So what we're trying to do with the trust is just support people to look at the impact that they're having on the land and to do something positive about it, because it is these, and lifestylers or life sentence block owners such as ourselves have a big impact collectively, so together we can make a really big difference. So yeah, but there's given that the government is still not certain on, it's not giving clear direction on where FEPs are going yet, like the ones that we're looking at, like our lifestyle block sizes, which are less than 20 hectares, that really does slip through the gaps actually. So I just say, will the recording be sent out? Yes, I can do that. Oh yes, and sustainable people for sustainable farming planning, CMOs for on the ground advice and advice around writing restoration plans. Thanks, Peter. That's awesome. So you guys can all see that there. And then, yep, definitely getting I'll send you a link to the recording. Oh, can't you see Peter's comments? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, I'll read that out properly. sustainable ag people for sustainable farm planning, so that's the regional council, and catchment management officers for on-the-ground advice and advice around writing restoration or planting plans. Here we go. Let me see if there's anything else. Funding, is there funding available like there's farmers? That's a good question. I don't think so, not for lifestylers, although I think different councils have different support available. So Waikato District Council does have a conservation fund that private landowners can apply to, and you don't have to be a big farmer. You can be a small block owner that has a patch of native bush or a wetland or something, or a kakatea stand. Waikato District Council, I believe, also has something like that. So it would pay to check with your local district council in terms of funding. And I do know that there are lots more funds out there, like WSEAT is a fund that landowners can apply to. It's a contestable fund that landowners can apply to if you want to restore a wetland, and wetlands are a high priority because we have so few left. So that's a good, I'll put that in an email to you. Now, I've just got a comment there saying Melinda Dresser is an awesome contact at WIC. She's in the Waipa region, has helped us with funding, tree planting and sources, native plants, and developing a farm plan. Oh, that's awesome. That's so awesome. Actually, Mel's a friend of mine. We used to work together. So that's so cool to hear that. And yes, we do have funding lists on our LANCA Trust website. So I can, if you go to our LANCA website, which is lanca.org.nz, there is under the region, there's a funding thing, and you can go there and have a look for all the different funding things. Oh, cool. This is great. You guys are good. Lots of knowledge. This is what it's about, sharing knowledge amongst people too, and, learning from each other. And I think that's really important. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, for coming along. Again, I really appreciate your being here today. And I will send out an email giving you the link to the recording, and I'll link the funding page website, and which has got the WSEAT information on it as well. Yeah, cool. And when they moved to 7 years ago, they got a grant from the Regional Council for riparian planting. So that's awesome. And it's getting harder and harder to get funding for these kinds of things, because it is sort of seen as part of business as usual, but it's still there. Yeah. Oh, good. And Waikato District Council provided funds towards that grant as well. So yes, do contact your local district council as well. Yeah. Alrighty. Well done, everyone. We're zooming through everything. So that's half an hour there. Funding is getting more focused on catchment care groups. Yeah, that's true. And as I pointed out, there are a few catchment groups in the Waikato. So you might find out that you're in you are in the area where a catchment group is, and so you could tie in with what they're doing. Yeah, well, you can see one up, true. Yeah, if you want to do that, let me know, and I'll help you out. We've got lots of resources on doing that as well on our website. Cool. All right, thank you very much, everybody. Again, finally, we'll call it quits there. So you've got some time to because it's looking like it's clearing up, so you can go outside and have a look at your critical source areas and go from there. Yeah. Thank you again for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. All right. Bye now.